Well, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Richard Lapidus, and it's my privilege to serve here as university president at Fitchburg State University, and I'll also serve this evening as tonight's moderator. Before we get started, however, I wanted to let everyone know that we were recording this session. And we'll be able to view it later on our YouTube channel if you'd like to see it again or share it with others. So to begin with, let me welcome Congresswoman Trahan. We're extremely honored that she's taking the time out of, I know, a busy schedule to join us this evening and talk a little bit about women in leadership positions. So welcome, Congresswoman. Over the years, I've been fortunate enough to have had several interactions with her and got to know her a bit. She's been a friendly face here on our campus, supporter of public higher education, and has been a strong champion for us in our work with the city of Fitchburg and our economic revitalization efforts. So maybe just to start off, I give you a very brief bio of her. So Congresswoman Trahan grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, was elected to the House of Representatives in 2018. She started her work in the Capitol as a scheduler with then Representative Marty Meehan, I'm sorry, and later his chief of staff. Once elected to her position, she served first in the House Committee on Education and Labor, the Armed Services Committee, and now she has moved on to other committees, which include the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, where she advocates for a broad array of issues around affordable health care, climate change, children and online, fighting disinformation in the media, and she also serves on subcommittees, Health, Consumer Protection and Commerce, and the Oversight and Investigations Committee. So once again, Congresswoman, thanks for joining us. We're happy that you were able to join us virtually, maybe next time in person, but thanks for joining us nonetheless. We had set this up as predominantly a question and answer session. The faces that I see on our little Google squares here are a combination of faculty, staff, quite a few students, and then we opened this up more broadly to the community at large. Some are on Google and some are streaming in from other sources. Mm-hmm. But I thought before maybe we started the question and answer, you had a few introductory comments to kind of kick it off.
Yeah, you bet. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, President Lapidus, and for that nice introduction. Of course, thank you to everyone who is joining this important discussion on women in leadership. It's a topic I never get tired of talking about. And truly, I was thrilled. I know it's so much better when we're together in person, but I was thrilled when President Lapidus invited me to be part of this event because I have sorely missed being able to visit Fitchburg State's campus, interacting with students, our next generation, the promise of all of that, and certainly just getting out and about the district. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in person, hopefully very soon. So for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure to meet already, I'm Lori Trahan. I proudly represent Massachusetts 3rd District. It's made up of 37 cities and towns, including Fitchburg. I was born and raised in a working class family in Lowell. I went to Lowell Public Schools. I started And I started working at 11 years old, delivering newspapers. That's when we did them on foot or bike. And I haven't really stopped working since. I waited tables in high school. I answered phones at a local insurance company. I counseled kids in the summer. And I think it was because I had a strong work ethic from my Brazilian and Portuguese grandparents who came to the United States in search of a better life. You know, my dad was a union iron worker. My mom, geez, she worked multiple part-time minimum wage jobs while juggling my 3 sisters and me. And so they worked really hard to provide for their 4 daughters. And it's really thanks to the sacrifices that they made that I was able to earn a volleyball scholarship to Georgetown, where I became the first person in my family to graduate from college. While I was at Georgetown, I recognized a calling, if you will, to public service. Although working in Congress wasn't exactly how I thought I'd do it. I was studying to become a foreign service officer. But, you know, where I ended up was after graduation, working for another Lowell native, former Congressman Marty Meehan. And it was really working in service of my hometown of Lowell and the surrounding communities and the families that office really worked hard for. That it was just a great honor, and it was eye-opening. And it stuck with me. I left Capitol Hill in the early 2000s. And truthfully, I didn't expect to be back, certainly not as a member of Congress. I actually went to the private sector, and I became the only female executive at a tech startup in Cambridge before going on to co-found a consulting company, which was focused on working with the bigger companies across our country and our globe to make sure that women were elevated, that they were ascending to leadership roles, and they were at decision-making tables. It really wasn't until 2017 when Congresswoman Nikki Tsongas announced her retirement that I felt the need to jump back into public service, representing the place I called home my entire life, and more importantly, ensuring that we had more women making decisions in the halls and the committee rooms of Congress. You know, when I ran for Congress, I did so promising that I was always going to be someone who worked towards solutions, making government work again for families like the one I grew up in, and toward ensuring that my own daughters and the next generation of women inherit a stronger and a healthier, more inclusive nation. That's why I jumped at the opportunity to take part in tonight's discussion, because I think we need many, many, many more women, especially young women who are ready to hit the ground running as our future leaders. So I've seen firsthand how conversations change when you have more women in the room. I always say that I don't need to read another study to know that when more women are at the table, better decisions are made. And I'm proud to be a member of the most female Congress in our country's history. But when you look at the numbers and see that only 27% of the seats in the House and the Senate are held by women, you realize how far we still have to go. Don't get me wrong, it's a vast improvement from where we were, and we have been able to capitalize on the momentum of electing more women by passing the Equal Rights Amendment, reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. Just today, we're passing the Paycheck Fairness Act to close the gender wage gap. So when I think about my role as a representative, a huge part of that responsibility is creating the space for the next generation of women. I have daughters, they're 7 and 11, and nothing motivates me more than the thought of a better future for them and for every young girl. And I can't tell you how empowering it is to see women who never thought about entering politics or public service come off the sidelines in droves because they recognize what's at stake. We're engaged in public discourse, we're activists, we're volunteers, and we're running to make a real difference. We have to be mindful and deliberate about opening up these lanes for women to succeed across all sectors of our society: science and engineering, medicine, tech, energy, finance. Because when you elevate women and when you set the conditions for women to thrive, everyone benefits. So I'll stop there because I know we have a lot of questions that we want to get to. But I'd just like to say thank you once again to President Lapidus and everyone who organized this important discussion, and for all of you for taking part in it.
Great. Well, thank you for setting that up and knocking off the first 3 or 4 questions I had for you.
Oh no, we can double click on any one of them.
We'll drill down. Yes. So as I mentioned, this is a question and answer session. I thought I would kick it off with maybe the first two or three. If we could use the raise hand button at the bottom, we can start a list of those that would like to ask a question. If you keep yourself muted until you have the opportunity to present, that'll eliminate some of the crosstalk and the static and the reverb that we've all become familiar with over the course of the last year. So I guess as a starting point, you mentioned that you joined with a wave of women, I think, in the House, and what, 26, 27% now in Congress as an overall number. And maybe you could just elaborate on that a little bit. You know, your experiences in seeing that growth, and maybe what you think it perhaps represents in terms of changing culture here in America.
Yeah, well, I do think it's an exciting time right now. We have our first female vice president in Kamala Harris, and the most female Congress in American history. And look, in a few weeks, President Biden is going to address joint session of Congress on his 99th day in office. And he will do so for the first time with two women seated behind him, Speaker Pelosi and, of course, Kamala Harris. And that's, that optic alone, I think is really important. I often tell my daughters, and they can't believe it because they're growing up right now and they'll never see a presidential debate stage that doesn't have a woman on it. And I never saw that. I never saw, with the exception of Geraldine Ferraro on the Mondale ticket, we didn't see enough women running for office and winning. And so I think it really, those optics matter so much. I do think it's incumbent on us, though, to use that momentum to finally enact legislation that will close the gender wage gap, protect our health and reproductive rights, provide paid family and sick leave, raise wages, ensure protections for pregnant workers, invest more in childcare, and so much more. But that's what's most exciting, is seeing how when you have women in the room, how the priorities change, how the conversations change in the policy setting. Our fingerprints are all over the American Rescue Plan, expanding the child tax credit and lifting children right out of poverty, rescuing our child care infrastructure, which is on the brink of collapse, getting to 2.5 million women who had to leave the workforce during the pandemic, and putting a jobs program together that addresses that, ensuring that we reopen our schools safely for our students and for our educators. And so I think when we make the decision to lift up women, our families are better off, our communities are better off, and frankly, our economy is too. And I think that's how we have to talk about it, is in terms of our economic, the economic incentives are aligned around setting the conditions for women to thrive. I'll say that when I think about being part of this Congress and the most female class in history, the first feeling isn't really celebratory, and that's just because of what you mentioned. Just 1 in every 4 members of Congress and in the Senate are women, and so we have a long way to go still. But I think it's important that when I talk to my colleagues, we're not there to take up space. We're there to create space for the next generation of women, and we're there to make sure we're doing what we can to attract more women. We're doing what we can to make sure that the way Congress operates is good for working moms, retired moms, for more women. And so I think that's a really important part to really address as we get more women is just making sure that the institution, we can actually attract and retain more women if we're going to get that 27% up to 50% or 60% or 100% or whatever the sky's the limit. So I think that, you mentioned what's, changing in our culture. I would say that there's a noticeable difference in the behavior that you see when you have more women, when you have more women in the room, when you have more women at the decision making table. Now, that's not to say, and I don't mean to make this question like too long, it's not to say that bad things still don't happen. We had a situation last year where a pair of our male colleagues accosted, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez on the steps of the Capitol, calling her disgusting and crazy for taking a position on policies that affected unemployment and poverty in her district. And that experience is one that every woman can relate to in some form during her career, certainly. It's something I came to know all too well in my own career. But what's different now is the reaction. When you have more women, there is less suffering in silence. There is less shame because we've all been there, and collectively we're there to say, we've had enough. And so look, just when that happened, it took less than 24 hours for all the women members of Congress to band together and go to the House floor and call out that unacceptable behavior and stand in solidarity with Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. And so I think it's incredible that we as women support each other and that we are all part of that culture change. So it's a critical improvement and proof that, frankly, having more women, be it in boardrooms or in Congress, can change culture in an instant.
Great. So if I could flip it around, because you kind of set up my next question for me. So 25% women and growing, which of course the flip side of that is 75% male.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, as you sort of live and work in that environment, what kinds of experiences, how have you thought about that ratio in terms of how it informs how you navigate? Because obviously it's got to be in the back of your mind in some sense that the numbers work against you at the moment, and if it plays a role in how you go about your everyday business.
So the numbers are, they are what they are. It doesn't mean we still don't have allies, right? And I think that's an important point, to make. This isn't us against them. It's about making the world better and more fair for women, and frankly for everyone, right? We've got some equity issues across our country, and we need to be really intentional about building and creating a more inclusive economy and society. For me, look, growing up, I learned quickly how to work and frankly perform in male-dominated workplaces. There weren't that many newspaper carriers who were girls growing up, and there were no other women executives at the tech company that I helped lead before coming to Congress. And so when all you're dealt are power structures that advantage men, well, you figure out pretty quickly how to work with men. Have I been passed over for a promotion I deserved? Of course. Was I paid less than my male counterparts? You bet. Did I have to make unfair trade-offs as a young working mom to keep pace with men who didn't have to shoulder those same obligations? Yes. Am I resentful? No, I'm motivated. I'm more motivated than ever to change the system, to change the culture, to change the power balance. I think you learn a lot along the way. But there are a lot of men who agree that women are getting shortchanged, and they're earnest about wanting more women in leadership, but haven't the foggiest idea on how to do it because it requires a dramatic shift in mindset. So look, I typically start, especially with my male colleagues, by telling them my story, whether that's the high cost of childcare that almost canceled out my paycheck when I first started, why, early morning office meetings don't always work for my family, what it was like playing Division I volleyball, and how no one adequately prepares young women, for example, for a career in science or engineering at a public school like Lowell High School. I could go on, but the point is making the conclusion self-evident after telling your story. And I think that's how you turn folks into allies. And so I think that we're seeing that. We're seeing that at the community level. We're seeing that certainly, in Washington. I didn't look at the vote count for paycheck fairness, but I imagine the reason why we were able to pass that bill through the House is because we had hundreds of men vote for it with us. And so I think that's an important thing for us to keep in mind, is you don't have to be a woman to be for elevating women and making sure that the conditions are there for us to have a great quality of life and earn the same as men.
Great. You mentioned your Georgetown experience, so we do have a lot of students on this call, and I'll just ask one more question and then I'll flip it over to them. So you and I have talked about your volleyball experiences at Georgetown, and I shared with you my inadequate play on the playground. But I'm wondering maybe if you could talk a little bit about how athletics and perhaps some of the other kinds of organizational activities and extracurriculars that you were involved in at Georgetown sort of played into how you think about what you're doing now, what skills you might have learned, to just kind of share with the student population here about sort of the broader base of liberal learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'm fortunate. My parents had 4 daughters. We had a lot of love. We're a very tight-knit family. But we also worked, right? More kids to my parents, I think, meant more hands to help out, and we all pulled our weight and then some around the house. We all began working outside the house at an early age. And, even though my mom and dad had 4 girls, we didn't really talk about gender differences much. Instead, there was this like constant chorus playing of, you can be whatever you put your mind to. Sky's the limit. Work hard, study hard, and you can do anything that you want in this world. And it turns out that I think that gave me a lot of audacity to dream big. It instilled in me certainly the dignity of hard work. And nowhere was that more evident than in sports. I started playing basketball early, well before my growth spurt. My father was pretty stingy with Scooby snacks, but explicit about one thing, that if I wanted to make the starting lineup, I had to work harder than everyone else. And so I was often in my driveway, rain or shine, practicing my shot or playing one-on-one. And I do think through sports, I developed a discipline on how to improve. I learned how to compete. I learned how to win. And I loved the whole process. I loved the workouts, the conditioning, even the time spent in the weight room. It just made me feel like I controlled the levers of my performance. And when I lost, most importantly, I reflected on what I could have done better. And I definitely leveraged that learning into an improvement imperative. And it turns out those are pretty good life skills, whether you're playing sports or running a sales team or starting a business or running for your first campaign. So much of what I experienced as an athlete prepared me for, the ups and downs that are inevitable, whether you're in business and politics. And so Georgetown was really just a great place for me to go, because one, I knew I wanted to go there. I mean, at an obscenely young age. I think in the 8th grade, I knew I wanted to go to the School of Foreign Service. I wanted to be a Foreign Service officer. I was going to make the world a more peaceful place. Like, that was the plan. And I had it written down. And then, like, life happens, right? My father was diagnosed with MS. I came home. I worked at a community service project that was designed to be more diverse and more inclusive, and I loved it. And then quickly went to go work for Marty Meehan and really got the public service bug. But, you know, college is like a special time in your life because I think it's when you're the most open. Of course, everything that you're doing in the classroom around learning how to, you know, think, you know, critically and formulate arguments and defend your position is all so important. But it's also just a great place to grow and to just be open to new ideas and other perspectives and listen. It was probably the first time that I went to a school where people were, you know, much, much, much different than me. So it was, you know, it was fantastic. And I do think a lot of the skills that you pick up along the way, whatever you commit to doing, whether it's, you know, theater, sports, you know, lab work, I mean, you do develop a discipline if you're focused on performance. And I think that carries through whether you're in the public sector or the private sector. I mean, my team is a service organization. We think all the time about how are we going to improve the lives of the people who call our office and the people who don't call our office. How are we going to be proactive about economic development, about getting funding back to the district so that, you know, we can invest in workforce programs or bridges and roads. And I think, you know, all of our life experiences we bring with us to our job, all of our lived experiences we do. So, you know, you are whether you know it or not, you are actively right now, you know, creating your own narrative. And it's quite exciting that, you know, your roots are going to be at Fitchburg State, and so many of the things that you do later on will be rooted in something that you did, you know, here during these years. So.
Thank you. So why don't we open it up? I see at least one hand up. Sydney, do you want to pose a question?
Yeah, hello. Thank you for coming. I'm already super excited because you said you were Portuguese and I'm Portuguese, and like I know the whole story about them coming to this country and working for everything. So my face already is lighting up. So we're already on a good start here. So I've dealt with being the only girl a lot of times in my life too. I started a sport in middle school where I was the only girl on my team for a lot of seasons. And now I'm in a major where it's more male dominated. I'm a math major here. And it's typically a lot more male dominated in the STEM field. So me and my friend Star are actually working on starting up the Feminist Conversations Club up again at this university.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, like, is there any like topics, advice, anything that would help us help other women feel that they can be leaders in whatever they want to be in, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So one thing I do leave out of my bio, but I wish I hadn't tonight because you would have lit up. I'm actually the first Portuguese-American woman to ever get elected to the Congress. How about that? So yes, it's an honor. And, you know, I have a district office in an old restored mill building in downtown Lowell, Massachusetts. And it is the same mill building that my grandmother worked in as a mill girl when she came over to the United States. And so it's like, it's not lost on me every single time I walk through the door, like how amazing this country is, because that is my story. So yes, there is so much. I mean, I think that when you're one, it's really hard to be one woman in a room representing the interests of all women, right? I mean, I saw this a ton when I was consulting on how do you get more women into the boardroom. And many times companies would say, okay, we'll just attract 1 or 2 women to our board. That doesn't actually, it's not really helpful. You really have to think about bigger clumps of women, because when the conversation changes is when you have more women, when you have equal parts women and men. That's when the priorities change, the behaviors change, certainly. But more importantly, like the conversations change so much that you're actually able to improve your performance as provided that it's more inclusive. And that is the trick. I think having men and women and diversity all at the table is so important, as long as people aren't in their silos, as long as we're doing everything that we can to get all those different perspectives out on the table. And inclusion is actually the hardest part sometimes, you know, setting the conditions so that people feel comfortable sharing their difference rather than just jumping into that common information effect, which so often, you know, guides a conversation. So I think we have to be really intentional about that. And so you can have a feminist conversation group, and it doesn't have to be all women. In fact, I think educating others on, you know, what the real compelling examples of what it's like to be the only woman in the room, or not making the same amount as, you know, their male counterpart. I mean, you know, reasonable people tend not to disagree on that, right? I mean, it's just fairness. And so I think it's a great time for you know, us all to engage in a conversation that's beyond us. And bring along our friends, our colleagues, our peers, you know, men and women alike, to that conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And one other thing I'll just say on that, women, we come up with all sorts of excuses to, you know, not lean into some of these conversations, to not run for office, right? We're busy. You know, I know that I tried to come up with every excuse as to why it was not a good idea for me to run for office. And there's no shortage of excuses or reasons, right, to sort of stay on the sidelines. And I think some of them we think in our head, you know, I'm not qualified. I'm not. I didn't really think about doing this my whole life. I'm not prepared. You know, what different perspective could I possibly bring? And I think one of the most important things that we should just like say to all women is just dispense with that. Your voice at the table, just right out of the gate, your perspective is of such high value. And so stop thinking about how you have to be the expert in the room. Stop thinking that you have to know every single statistic or number or fact or historical perspective. I mean, just that pressure is something only we do to ourselves. And so just jump in, don't dispense with the excuses, and just most of the things that we do in life are learned by doing anyway. And sometimes learning is failing. And you have to just get, I don't know, a little comfortable with accelerating that fail to improvement cycle. But it really is liberating. And it's the key to us, you know, sort of stepping off those sidelines in droves.
Other questions? Miranda?
Hi, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. My question would be, you know, our parents or parental figures are usually our first cheerleaders. They're the ones who cheer us on when we take our first steps and little things like that. And historically, your parents would have came from a almost completely male-dominated society. So when they heard that you were like pushing for this, what was their reaction?
Oh, yeah, they were all in. I mean, they were proud. They were happy. They were rolling up their sleeves as I was telling them, like, what do I need to do? Where are the signs? I mean, they were, there was not an ounce of, have you thought about this? Or, you know, what are we going to do with the children? I mean, they were just, yes. This is so important. We need more women. I think if you go back to the campaign, and it started in 2017, you know, there were a lot of folks that wanted to see a congressional seat, you know, passed from one woman to another. That's just, that has never been done in our state before. And so, you know, that I think was incredibly motivating for my entire family. And, you know, as I said earlier, my parents I think one of the things that they really did a great job of is always leading with, you've got a couple of levers at your disposal, right? You're going to work hard. You've got a great public education, and you've got an opportunity to take those two gifts and really make something of your life, right? Really, it's yours. Those are the things that you can count on, and you can invest in, and you can, you can be anything that you want to be. And I do think that gave all of me and my sisters and me sort of the audacity to think differently about what our future, what we could accomplish in our future. So. Yeah, I'm lucky. I had two great parents. They didn't lack courage themselves.
Thank you. Who else?
I see Sam there too. Can I call out Sam, President?
Hi. Yeah, you can.
I was actually going to do that. I was going to say, so you mentioned learn by doing, and obviously Sam is a student here, but an intern in your office. Maybe you could share a little bit about what that experience is like, why you think it's valuable, and perhaps others, encourage others to consider it.
Oh, well, it's so important for us to create opportunities, for the next generation, especially for our young women. And Sam has been a wonderful addition to our office. We're incredibly lucky to have her. She's enthusiastic about public service, and has really been just a bright light in our office during an incredibly challenging time. And I'm happy to report that we have a pretty successful track record of attracting superstar FSU student interns to our office. They've certainly set the bar high for everyone in our internship program. And in my office, interns play a critical role in serving the constituents of the 3rd District and supporting the work our team is able to accomplish each day. These opportunities are not only important, but they're necessary in investing in our young adults who are entering the workforce. It kind of gives you a taste of what you might want to do. And sometimes folks work in our office and they rule out, something that they thought they wanted to do, and it wasn't, for them. But I do think, I said it earlier, and I can't say it enough, I really do take seriously the opportunity to create space for more women in leadership positions. My consulting company focused on getting more women into the boardroom and C-suites in companies across the country. In Congress, it's important that we have a multiplier effect on attracting and retaining more women in elected office. And that starts with investing in our next generation today. We actually deliberated at the start of COVID because practically every office shut down their internship programs when we all began working remotely. And we didn't. We doubled down and we hired more interns because we knew it would be an incredible opportunity for us to help more people, and two, to give a truly unique experience to our next generation of leaders. And so I really hope more folks consider coming into our internship program. I do think that it gives students a closer look of what it means to participate in public service and in policy making. They get to dig into legislation, the public support and the criticism of that legislation, and the politics of how you get meaningful legislation passed and signed into law. So yeah, I think it's, I'm proud of how far our interns have come. I hope that they all carry with them a healthy desire to stay humble and to contribute to their communities.
Well, thank you for providing the opportunities. I mean, as an applied institution, we certainly encourage students to try to do whatever their interests are and get some firsthand experience. So thank you for opening that avenue for them. I see, Sam, you had your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to add how amazing the opportunity has been. I think I have grown within my advocacy, and I've learned so much about the work that is really being done in Congress. What I wish is, how can we implement this on a level where I wish I knew as a freshman in college that I had such a voice that I do now. If I met me in the past, I wish I could have told myself that. I wish I could have told myself that in high school.
Yeah.
How could we do this to let women know from the get-go? That way that they can start out having a voice before I started having my own. Because I know through your internship and all the work that I have worked on personally, I have grown my voice working on your NIL form letter and working on abolishing the death penalty, dear colleague letter. Things such as that has built my issues on civil rights, and I just want kids younger than me to learn that before I did.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. We all wish we could go back and talk to the younger version of ourselves. But it's a good point. I think it's one of the reasons why having role models like you and like your peers, your age group, kind of go back to, I never think it's too early. Some might say high school. I say go back right to middle or elementary school and really start giving women, like young girls, the opportunity and the license to practice using their voice. Everyone cares about causes. Sometimes they're local, sometimes they're big, but everyone has, a care or a passion, and it's whether or not they put their voice behind it in terms of, maybe making progress against a goal you have. And so, look, mentorship is important. Women helping women is so important. I have this issue that drives me crazy because it's just so prevalent in our news media. Sometimes it feels like all the bad guys that are women, right? I mean, all the people who are getting villainized in our politics sometimes are women, and that drives me nuts because I don't think it's an accurate portrayal, and I do think that it's easy for folks to create a two-dimensional character of a woman who's in power. And I think what we have to do is that burden is on us. We have to make sure that we don't fall victim to that we are supporting other women when it happens to them, that we're lifting women up all the time so that we quickly or in a very accelerated way kind of end that trend of beating up on women who are doing hard things. And so I do think that we all do, everybody finds their voice at a different time. I'm so happy that you're finding yours in our office. And I do think that we also have an obligation to help others find it, earlier and get them comfortable with them using their voice. I'll tell you, I mean, we lived through a tough year, not just with COVID, but with Black Lives Matter, with all the civil unrest that we saw in the streets. But nothing gave me more hope and optimism about that really converting into change than when I see our young people, in the streets and on social media and calling out injustice. I mean, that's what's actually going to change our world. And so I think that, making sure that people know how important what an important role that they play in changing culture is the whole ballgame. And we all can contribute to that.
Thank you. I see Aaron, you have a question?
Hello.
Hi. I'm looking for you. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. So in general, I've heard a lot of activism regarding the wage gap and equal pay, but I've also heard many say that the wage gap is a myth. So I'm just wondering, in regards specifically to the state of Massachusetts, what does the situation really look like?
Well, Massachusetts does tend to lead on a whole host of issues, which I'm so, it's what makes me so proud to come from the state of Massachusetts. I mean, I sit on the healthcare subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and, I get to talk about how we use our Medicaid dollars to have the lowest uninsured rate in the country, right? I mean, we've invested more than any other state in renewable energy. And so in Massachusetts, we have been very progressive in our state. But it doesn't mean that it's still not an important issue of, for bringing the rest of the country as standards up, right? We talk about that with minimum wage. It typically comes up like, yes, you can raise the minimum wage in states where there's a higher cost of living, but there are rural communities in states like Alabama that can't afford. They will actually be shuttering businesses, and I just don't buy that. I don't buy that a $15 minimum wage is actually going to put a company or a small business out of business. It's time that we make sure that folks are paid a family sustaining wage, and that no one has to work 2 and sometimes 3 jobs to keep themselves afloat and their family afloat. And so setting that national standard is really important. Look, this is about workplace fairness, and it's not a myth, right? Women are getting paid 82 cents for every dollar. That number goes down to, I believe, 63 cents for Black women in this country, and to 50-something cents for Latinas. I mean, that cannot stand. And so I think by making it a federal standard, a federal mandate, we do force states to bring their benchmarks up. So it's a really important issue that is, it's been talked about for decades, and we haven't gotten there yet. And I think it's an important signal, not only for us to pass this and sign it into law, but also for other things to come. I mean, look, we've got millions of women who don't have sick leave, right? They can't take off a sick day from work to care for their child or for a parent or a loved one. We don't have paid family leave. That disproportionately harms women. And so we have to make sure that we look at these issues as equity issues, equality issues, and that we make sure that women get a fair shake, in the workplace.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Joseph.
Yes. Hello. Thank you first for coming today. I really appreciate when representatives actually come to Fitchburg State, because we're the youth. We are able to vote. Some people forget that, but also
not me. I voted to lower the age to 16.
Well, thank you. Yes. But so my question today, it's a mix of kind of everything, but so as you may know, this morning, Ed Markey and a few other Democrats proposed expanding the Supreme Court to 13 justices. I was wondering what you thought about it, and also would this be a great way to kind of get more women representation on the Supreme Court as well?
Yes. And what automatically pops into your mind is that beautiful quote by Ruth Bader Ginsburg when someone asked her, well, how many justices do you think should be on the court? And she said, well, a woman justices should be on the court. And she said, well, 9, of course. We've had 9 male justices before. And it's a very interesting issue right now. And I think we've seen the Senate play politics with our nomination and our confirmation of judges, which has really been so disheartening to watch, both with Kavanaugh and Comey Barrett. I mean, that's just, I think that's why we're here. And so we're actually reviewing the legislation and the plan that Senator Markey's proposed. It's not also what happened that I think is worth noting is that the president established a commission to review Supreme Court reform. And so I think that that's also a very good step to think through, like what those options are, what those recommendations are. I mean, certainly folks have talked about term limiting judges. We've talked about expanding the bench, but there's probably other, recommendations. And so I think looking at the full host of like what a reform would look like, I think is what we need to do, because look, these are not casual conversations or casual decisions. I mean, these are going to have long-term effects. And so it's going to be, really important for us to be, very thoughtful about how we reform the court. But yeah, we're looking at it very closely because it's for one, the nomination and the confirmation of our justices should never fall victim to partisan politics the way it has in the last 4 years. What else, Joe? You said you had a couple things.
Oh no, that was it. I was just saying combining like making sure women representation as well as getting into like, I guess, political news up to date. But I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who else? Well, while people are thinking, maybe I'll throw out another one here. So I've seen some of your ads and some of the things that you've been doing, I think, sort of outside the political arena. I think I've seen some things with your daughters and reading time and those kinds of things. Maybe you could share a little bit about sort of the work-life balance issues that are so important. It's great to work hard, but I think without a little sort of downtime and family time, et cetera, you run the risk of burning out.
Yeah, no, there's no question. And thank you for the question. It's a very nice one. I don't believe that there really is a balance. And I say that, but like, just because, and if there is and someone has figured it out, they have not shared it with me. I do think about it more in terms of trade-offs. Right now, I think the two things that I'm most focused on is my family and the work that, the responsibility that I have being a good representative. And so sometimes that makes me not a great friend. Sometimes it makes me not a great volunteer at my children's school. Sometimes I'm not a fantastic sister or a daughter. But I think sometimes you have to be explicit about what your trade-offs are so that you don't try to be great at everything, right? Because that's exhausting. It typically leads to exhausted mediocrity, which I don't want. And it really doesn't get you any closer to a balance. So, for me, I think that's dynamic. I think in different times of my life, I have been a great family member, a great friend, and a great, maybe I did put my career on autopilot a little bit, although I can't really think of an example of that. But what I'm saying is, like, I think those trade-offs in a individual's life change. My family is where I get my energy. It's where I get my confidence and my motivation and my energy. So it's really important that I have planned time off with them so that I can be restored. This job is it's demanding, and you work hard at it, and you still don't feel as though you're doing enough. So when I can come home and spend time with just so you know, I've got two little girls. They're 7 and 11. I've got 3 grown stepsons. They're 27, 23. We just had birthdays, so I'm recalibrating. 23 and 22, and we are. We try to get together as much as we can, not just for holidays. And this year, of course, it's been tough, but, on Sundays or, on FaceTime, because I think coming together is really what gives me a lot of I don't know, a lot of restoration. So yeah, I think it gives me the ability to really work hard. It gives me the ability to keep things in perspective. And certainly all I have to do if I don't have that fire in my belly on an issue, I just look at my daughters. There's nothing more motivating than thinking about why I'm in this job in the first place, which is to ensure a better future for them and for you. So yeah, my family's really important. It's a big part of why I'm doing this work.
Yeah, thank you for that. Dr. Bayless.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've loved listening to it. So we are in a unique situation in history, not unique, but rare, I guess I would say, in terms of getting ready to come out of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
And there are things that, of course, have been awful, and there are things maybe that have been good. What are you thinking about in terms of what we as a country, we as a state need to be enacting, holding on to, letting go of? What have we learned in this process that we might not have learned any other way? But it's spring, and so I'm thinking about new growth and moving forward, and I'd be very interested in your insights about that.
It's a great question, and I have a whole lot to say about it. You know, I think one of the things I repeat the most is when the president says "Build Back Better." It really is the lens that I use in all of our policymaking. You know, the reality is going back to normal. It wasn't great for everyone, and I think it's really important that we confront that as our reality, and we do what we can to make sure that we're coming back stronger, but also more inclusive. That's why you saw the American Rescue Plan had so much around equity, whether it was healthcare equity, broadband, making sure everybody had access to broadband, making sure that we were giving our community health centers their own supply of vaccines to go out into underserved communities and put shots in arms. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest changes that we've seen in this past year, is that we're looking at everything through an equity lens: education, housing, transportation, environmental justice, right? I mean, we're not just talking about electric vehicles and building an infrastructure for that. We're making sure that our underserved communities are going to be able to have access to electric vehicles, and we're not exporting emissions, right? I mean, this is so important that we think about it in this way. So I do think Building Back Better is a really good frame to put on how do we come out of this pandemic to make sure that we're stronger and more inclusive, and that we're making investments in communities that many times throughout our history have felt left behind. The other thing is, I think it's really important to wring out the lessons that we've learned in this pandemic. And I think people are doing that right now in real time. I mean, certainly on the committee that I sit on, we've already talked about telehealth, for example, because so many people were fearful about going to their doctor's appointment. They actually use telehealth. Now, that's something that we were supposed to get around to making that, part of our healthcare delivery system like a decade ago. And we stood it up overnight. Hospital and healthcare delivery systems stood up telehealth programs because they had to, and people loved it. And so, and the other unbelievable positive externality around standing up telehealth is now the minimum wage worker who couldn't have ever taken a day off to go to their doctor's appointment, they can go to their appointment, right? They can have that conversation with their primary care physician over their lunch break. So no-show rates have dropped. And so looking at the data, even just this past year of how telehealth has improved healthcare delivery, mental health services, is going to be really important. Certainly we have a lot to do to make sure everybody has access to telehealth, which is why our infrastructure and jobs package includes making broadband ubiquitous, right? Not just in rural communities, but in our communities where folks can't afford it, or in our communities where there's either no competition or there's too many dead zones, right? I mean, making broadband central to our infrastructure package is is also part of, building back better and making sure that no one is being left behind. And so one other thing that I think about, I was sickened last March when it was clear that we were entering into an unknown, a pandemic, and we were just caught flat-footed. It never had to be that way. We did not have, we were wholly reliant on a foreign supply chain, which had horrible consequences for our healthcare heroes who didn't have PPE or the medical devices that they needed to deliver the care that they needed. And we have to make sure that we think about preparedness. We do a great job of thinking about preparedness for our national security. In fact, we've got like a $770 billion budget used for protecting our national security, but we don't have anything in place for our health security. We don't have a health security stockpile. And so I think it's going to be really important that we think about bringing our supply chain back to the United States, making sure that we have vaccine stockpiles, antigen stockpiles, PPE stockpiles, so that, if this happens again, which it likely will, that we're never stuck flat-footed or caught flat-footed again. And so I think wringing out the lessons as quickly as we can so that we have an eye towards building back better and being better prepared, and then also reestablishing our global leadership. One of the reasons why I'm for the United States playing a lead role in vaccinating the world is because that's who we are. When we say with pride that we're from the United States of America, it's because we've often we've led against human rights abuses. We've led in bringing up or ensuring that the developing countries have what they need to grow and accelerate their development. And so for us, it's not enough for us to vaccinate the United States. If we're going to be a good global citizen, we need to make those vaccines available to the rest of the world. And so I am excited about the opportunity ahead. I think that there are a lot of folks who are thinking similarly in our administration, in the Senate, in the House, and so I think this is an exciting time for our country. Certainly for the government to play a more productive role than it has. In more recent times in the lives of the American people.
I wanted to be respectful of your time. I know we had a 7 o'clock end. We have, it looks like, one more hand raised. Do you have another minute or two, or would you like to stop?
Absolutely.
Okay, Elizabeth, this will be our last one.
Hi. Yeah, I go by Buffy. We met like 2 years ago at an Elizabeth Warren rally or something, and you were very nice, so thank you for that. And I just
did I take a picture of you and the senator?
Yeah, no, I took a picture. Actually, the Joe who asked the question earlier, that's my twin. So we were there.
Oh my gosh, I guess I am just seeing the last names. Okay. Terrific.
Yeah. So I just have a fun question. So I'm a film major here, film and theater. And obviously film is kind of dominated by men typically. But I just wanted to know, like, what's your favorite movie or TV show that you've kind of seen this year? And if there are any female filmmakers that you really like. So
those are such great questions. Oh gosh, well, this is like off the record. I see we're recorded, but I was a huge Girls fan. I love Lena Dunham, and I follow her because I think she's got enormous courage and artistic capability. I gotta tell you, I always would ask people like, "Oh, what are you watching?" I think I'm going to binge watch a series, and then my husband would look at me. He's like, "Really? I haven't seen you binge watch anything since Game of Thrones," and that was well before I ran for office. So I'm a little behind on pop culture. I guess that's one of the trade-offs I've made, and it's a sad one because I miss it. I miss watching. Especially right now, there's such high quality programming that's getting streamed. So I know this maybe sound like a cop-out, but I'd love a few recommendations for that day that I do take a break on a weekend. And I'm going to say Buffy, but how do you say your last name? Catella?
Yeah, Catella, yeah.
Buffy Catella told me I should watch this because you're a film major. That makes you an expert. Definitely more so than the people I typically solicit.
Yeah, I guess I'm an expert. Yeah, I'll give you 2 movies that came out this year, and they're both nominated for Best Picture. You got to watch Promising Young Woman. It's amazing. Okay. And then you got to watch Nomadland. Those 2 movies, they're both about women. It's amazing. And then you could talk about it with AOC in Congress or whatever. I don't know what you people do in Congress.
We do talk about that stuff, just so you know. I mean, we are normal human beings, and we typically connect on things like movies and what you did last weekend and her new puppy. So yeah, we're just regular people.
I did a briefing on United States v. Billie Holiday for you, so I can definitely send that to you. And that's a movie that just came out too, and I watched it after I did that briefing. So
awesome. You know, I did see the Mrs. America. There was like a 4-part, and it was terrific. But yeah, I am behind, admittedly. But Nomadland and Promising Young Women. I have till when are the Oscars on? How much time do I have? I'd like to watch them before.
I think you've got 2 weeks. I think it's 2 Sundays from now. Yeah,
that's ambitious, but I think I can do it. Oh, sorry, that's my puppy. Hold on. Okay. Thank you for that, Buffy.
Well, thank you again. This is probably a great segue out with the dog barking in the background. So again, thank you for the time. We certainly appreciate it. I'm hoping that we can do it again soon here on campus. A lot of good questions, a lot of insight. So thank you for that. And I thank for all of you for participating this evening and continue to make your voices heard, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Nice seeing you all. Take care.
Nice seeing you again. Thank you.